The Warriors have been forced into an impossible decision for the upcoming season. Steve Kerr and the rest of the organization still with so many questions yet to be answered, and quite possibly the biggest question mark heading into the season: who will be on the floor in the starting lineup opening night on October 21st against the Los Angeles Lakers? What's going on, everybody? I'm Houston Bo. You're watching Warriors Digest. Thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. And if you could do me a favor today, maybe right now or after you watch the video, go down below in the comment section. Let me know who you want to be the starting five for the Golden State Warriors on opening night against the Lakers. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere. I'm so ready and so happy that we are so close to tip-off. And before we get into everything Warriors content today, I want to remind you guys that about 67% of you guys that watch the videos aren't subscribed. Super simple. Go down below, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and turn on notifications. It is the easiest and most important way for you guys to be able to support us and follow us on the channel. And it also helps you guys to ensure that you'll never miss a video or any news or media around the Warriors. We're super excited about this upcoming season. And like I said, the most important question, and something that I always look forward to discovering, who's going to be in that starting lineup. Obviously, Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green. As long as those three guys are on the team, you can almost guarantee that they're going to be in the starting lineup. And today we're going to have to use our imagination a little bit because this Warriors roster is not finalized. Still a lot of question marks yet to be answered. And obviously one of the biggest ones still is this whole situation with the Jonathan Kuminga, Al Horford, D'Anthony Melton situation. But first off, for today, we're going to use our imagination and say that best case scenario happens and Al Horford, D'Anthony Melton, Gary Payton are all signed and Jonathan Kuminga stays. Okay, so what exactly would this team look like if we get lucky enough and blessed enough as a franchise to be able to get Gary, D'Anthony, Al Horford, and Jonathan Kuminga all on this team ready to play on the roster on October 21st? I think it's pretty much a given that these four guys will be in the starting lineup if that is the case. Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Al Horford. Now, the average age of these guys is about 36, 37, okay? So this is not a youthful starting lineup, and it's dependent on who you throw in that two guard, that shooting guard position is really, for me, the biggest question. Because I enter this season and I look at these guys. Again, Steph and Jimmy, if they're healthy, they're always going to be in the starting lineup. You're not benching those guys. Draymond is such a vocal leader and such a defensive presence for this team. He obviously was the second, around that in Defensive Player of the Year voting for a stretch there towards the end of the season. And Draymond makes such an impact that you feel like he's not a guy that would respond well to be putting on the bench. I can't imagine a conversation with Steve Kerr and Draymond Green saying, "Hey, Dre, we appreciate all that you've done for the organization, but I think it's time for you to move to the bench." I can't see Draymond responding to that well. Now, over the last 2 years, we actually have seen that a couple of times, especially when Draymond's been coming off an injury, and Dre's come back and played well after injury or after suspension, and he's come off the bench to kind of get his rhythm back, and he's played well. But I think these four are basically not confirmed, obviously, but I like the opportunity to have these guys on the floor at the same time to start a game. But that two guard, maybe the three guard position is interesting to figure out exactly who's going to fill that role. I like D'Anthony Melton. What we saw from him early in the season last year when Steph and D'Anthony played that 1 and 2 together, I felt like it worked really well because D'Anthony Melton is such a scrappy defender and athletic guard, and he also can shoot the three ball really well. This feels like these four are going to be on the floor. It's just understanding that there are so many options for who can fill that too. Gary is an option. Of course, the spacing isn't the greatest thing in the world if you bring Gary in because he's not a consistent shooter like the other guys are. You could bring Pods in, a guy that has proven that he can play well when he starts. Obviously, the shooting is improving, but it feels like Pods is probably going to run the second unit. And then maybe you say, okay, maybe Moses Moody because the team had a lot of success when he started. Maybe it's Buddy Hield who showed that when he's hitting threes and playing solid defense. We saw from Buddy last year during the playoffs and towards the end of the season, Buddy Hield was making defensive plays and pickpocketing guys like I've never seen Buddy Hield play defensively that well in his life. So if he can take that side of his game to another level, maybe he gets that starting two guard role. There's so many questions that have yet to be answered, as I said in the intro, but that feels like the biggest one. If these four guys get the start, who was going to be in that two role? And I'm interested to know what you guys think. So as I said, put your comments down below. If this is what the team looks like in this position, who do you want to be in that shooting guard spot? Now, there are other options. We saw this a little bit last season. Now, if you want to go a little ultra small ball, maybe you put Steph and Buddy, two of the shooters over the last 5 years who've made the most threes, which is an incredibly impressive stat to have for two guys who could be in your starting lineup. Maybe you say, okay, we bring Gary in because when he started, he's played well. He has a defensive presence that we want to bring onto the team, and the athleticism is obviously there. You pair that with Steph pick and roll with the two smaller guards, and it works out really well. Jimmy Butler playing the 4, and maybe you have Gary play a little bit of the 4 if he could guard some of those bigger defenders, because he does okay in the paint against larger defenders. So maybe Jimmy's technically in the 3. Him and Gary can sort of be interchangeable in that role. And we've had a lot of success when you've played Draymond at the 5 in the past. A lot of people sort of go back and forth on whether or not you like the small ball lineup. I personally do, but I think one of the major things that we've struggled with over the years is rebounding, and Gary Payton and Jimmy Butler are obviously great hustle rebounders, but they don't have the size that maybe necessarily that other option lineup would be if you put Al Horford in the starting lineup. And I think Horford also brings shooting and defensive capabilities that I like a little bit more than this. I do think there is some merit to this, and if we have big injuries, with our 4s and 5s, and maybe this is something that we go to, I think it's a great option. But again, this looks like the team from last year. I'd rather have Melton or Horford in that starting lineup and bring something fresh to the team. Other options that we've got this: Steph, Melton, Jimmy, Kuminga, and Horford. Now, this obviously provides the assumption that Draymond has an injury or that Draymond is okay getting moved to the bench. Now, the reason that this lineup is interesting is because this would prove and show that Steve Kerr is okay meshing the timelines. He says, okay, we understand what we have from a veteran standpoint with Steph, Jimmy, and Horford, guys who have been in the league for a long time. But he's also going to say, Dre, let's put you to the bench. Let's bring in Jonathan Kuminga to play that 4 position. And I'll tell you what, this only works if 2 things happen. If Kuminga's shooting is improved and if his rebounding is improved. We cannot consistently play Jonathan Kuminga at the 4 if he does not rebound the ball. He just has to, especially because he's going to be playing against larger power forwards in the Western Conference. So I think this is really interesting, and I think if Draymond has struggles, he gets suspended. Exactly what all that looks like, we're unsure. But if he does get into a position like that, or purely he's just not playing well, I think this presents some capabilities from a speed standpoint that would be incredibly difficult for teams to defend against. But again, I get a little worried about the defensive side of things because Kuminga is nowhere near the defender that Draymond Green is from a 4 position. I love Steph and Melton as the backcourt. That is the starting backcourt of this team. I truly believe if we end up signing D'Anthony Melton, because I feel like Pods will run the second unit in a better way than maybe Melton would. And then we have another option here. This was it says 11-0, but I actually think these guys ended up getting to like 15-0, 16-0 at one point, maybe 14-0 when these guys were in the starting lineup, right? Draymond, Jimmy, Steph, Pods, Moses, Moody. This is another small ball lineup that I think could be really, really successful, and we've seen it in the past. But again, you just struggle to know who's going to run that second unit if this is the team that we work with. Now, obviously, you could do a rotation style like this. You could go, okay, we're going to have Steph play the first 5 minutes of the game. Then we're going to sub him out. We're going to have Pods run maybe the minutes 1 through 8, 1 through 9, and then we'll bring Steph back in to end the first quarter when Pods subs out. And then that's a rotation that allows you to get those guys staggered enough to the point where you can start them both. Moody is a guy, as we've talked about and as we dropped in a previous video the other day, when he starts, this team has success. I don't know if there's some sort of secret sauce to it, but it just feels like when Moses Moody's in the starting lineup and he plays well, he's shooting the 3-ball well, he's playing solid defense, that this team plays really solid. I'm not entirely sure of what this team will look like if we sign Melton and Horford. It feels like this starting lineup is incredibly unnecessary. Not unnecessary, but unlikely. But there's still the potential that if we don't sign Al Horford, if we don't sign D'Anthony Melton, if the Jonathan Kuminga situation falls through, this will be the starting lineup for your Golden State Warriors. Now, obviously, there's the potential that we could run a lineup like this, and then instead of put Podziemski in there, swap a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. Obviously, you could throw Trayce Jackson-Davis in there. You could throw Quinten Post in there. There are options for this team that go beyond just the 4 that I've shown, but it feels like these are the most likely scenarios. And obviously, as we've shown, this is a major point of emphasis that has to be decided in the next couple of weeks before training camp kicks off if we want to have a pure look at what this team is going to look like from a roster standpoint. And we did a roster breakdown the other day. Now, obviously, there are still questions up in the air of who's actually going to be on the roster, but it feels like these are the options. I like these 4. I like this 5, but maybe not to the point that I like the others. I like this a lot if there are Draymond issues, but I do think from a size standpoint we'd struggle. And I like this as well if we don't get the signings figured out or if we have to go to a smaller ball situation. Now, again, those are the four that I see as the biggest potential for what this team could be and what is most likely. I also think if the Horford situation if we get Steph, Melton, Jimmy, Dre, I think it's more likely that Quinten Post fills that role than Trayce Jackson-Davis because Quinten Post played really well last season in stretches, and he also shoots the three ball a little bit. If we have Melton in the game and not Horford, really Steph and Melton are the only two solid shooters on the floor, so I think you'd bring Quinten Post in to be able to go run pick and roll. Steph to the fade is an option where it's less of an option if you have Trayce Jackson-Davis in the game. But obviously it's a give and take because the athleticism side of things would be less if Post is in the game and not Trayce. So there are a lot of options. And I like the opportunities that this team has if those signings with Melton and Horford come to fruition and if Kuminga chooses to stay. The good thing about the Kuminga situation is regardless of if he signs the 2-year deal or the qualifying offer, he's going to want to win and prove himself either way, because if it's the 2-year deal, he's going to be fighting for rotational minutes, and Kuminga has done that over the last couple of years. And when he has played well, Steve Kerr's proven that he'll put him in the game. If he has the qualifying offer, it's essentially a tryout for the other teams across the organization to say, look, I'm going to be an unrestricted free agent next summer, right? Understand what I'm doing. Look at the improvements that I'm making throughout the season. So either way, that signing I think is going to be solid for the Warriors. And if those other ones, as I said, come to fruition and we get to a point where we have a solid, 10 to 11 man rotation, because I think if we sign Horford and Melton, the depth of this team will be really, really good. Then I think the sky's the limit. But obviously, it's an impossible decision for Steve Kerr to make. When you have this much talent on the team, potentially, who do you go to in the starting lineup? Hopefully, from the get-go, we find a couple rotations that we really like. Maybe we get it cut down to 8 or 9, but then Kuminga or Moody or Post or somebody's minutes are getting cut. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but this is the fun time of the year where there are so many question marks up in the air that will all get answered so very soon, and we're going to cover it all right here on the channel. I've been Houston Bo. You guys have been the fans. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please leave your starting fives in the comments. I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are on this. And, of course, hit that subscribe button to never miss out on future content here on the channel. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.